Welcome to Community Focus, a public affairs presentation of Christian Talk 1160 WCVX. And now, here's your host, Jessica Rice.
Hi, and welcome to Community Focus, a public affairs presentation of the Christian Broadcasting System. I'm your host, Jessica Rice, and joining me today in the studio is Sandi Kuehn, President and CEO of Center for Addiction Treatment in Cincinnati. Sandi, welcome.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. So today we're going to be discussing the opioid crisis that unfortunately is really kind of taking center stage in northern Kentucky and Ohio, and the Center for Addiction Treatment and sort of what you guys do to help combat this issue. So if you could just sort of share with us maybe the statistics currently about opioid use in our communities and what's going on there.
Well, this is not a new issue. In fact, this epidemic we started to see back in 06-07. The public has just, over the last few years, gotten to be a little more involved with what's going on locally and then nationally. The center, we've had 50 years of addiction treatment specialty under our belt, so we were not too surprised when we started to see the uptick in opioid abuse in our area. Unfortunately, anyone who does not treat their disease, and addiction is a disease, it's a brain disease. One who does not treat it will die from it. How quickly that happens is dependent on lots of things, but one of the things that makes this particular epidemic so powerful and horrendous is you can die the next time you use, as opposed to 20 years later when you die of cirrhosis of the liver from alcoholism, etc. So it's the immediacy of the death, it is the fact that it is a death, as opposed to a lingering illness that has really become quite disturbing for all of us, not only who work in this field, but for everyone else. We typically say everyone knows someone, and that's really the truth. It may not be you, and it may not be someone in your immediate family, but it's going to be a friend, it's going to be a friend's daughter, etc. So it's not that this disease is flying under the radar because it's so prevalent, at least at this point in time. Last year in Hamilton County, we had 416 deaths from overdoses. Wow. The year before, it was in the 380s. Don't remember exactly what, but can you think of anything else, any other public health issue where you have those kinds of deaths in a single year, and we do basically very little about it? I can't.
Right. And it sounds like, and I can hear the passion in your voice about this topic, but it sounds like, unfortunately, these deaths are continuing to increase every year.
They are continuing to increase, and most of that's driven by the synthetic opioid, either fentanyl or carfentanil. It was bad enough when it was just the pain pills or heroin on the street, but the lethality of fentanyl and carfentanil is many times greater than heroin. We used to be concerned because people were using pain pills, and there's a certain piece of it that now wish you could go back to there, because at least it was an FDA-approved drug. Every time you got OxyContin, it was the same formula that you got, days before, and now it can be anything that's in that little baggie. In fact, a lot of cocaine now is also being cut with fentanyl. So people think they're buying cocaine, but they're actually getting fentanyl.
This all just really sounds crazy to me, and I think that a lot of times we have in our heads you mentioned earlier, what a junkie looks like, or what a user looks like. And I think we're finding out that there is no particular category. It's non-discriminate.
It does not discriminate, but there are certain populations that it's more prevalent in. For some reason or other, and there's some theories, and none of them have been able to be proved, if you will. But not only in Cincinnati, but across the United States, this particular epidemic hits white people much more than it does any other ethnic group. In fact, 80% of our client base is Caucasian. And that's going to be the same whether we're talking about California or Maine. The other piece of it's young. It originally started, or it really poked its head up, if you will, with the 20-somethings. A lot of it driven, again, by the medical field itself because of the proliferation of prescribed opiates for injuries in soccer or whatever. And that's when we started to see a shift in the age, particularly with cat. Historically, we would have served a 45, 50-year-old. That would be the average age. We don't treat anyone under 18. It would be very rare to see someone even in their 20s. Starting in about 2010, it was rare to see someone in their 40s. So this is hitting very close to a very young population. It is affecting, from an economic perspective, the number of people who are available in the workforce, which can, really squash, if you will, the rate of growth that our economy can have, because we don't have the labor participation that we would normally have. That's just a side effect. The real effect is the deaths that are occurring. The mothers and the fathers, the babies who are losing parents, the grandparents who are now back in a parental role because of the child's death. It's really quite tragic.
It is. Are you finding that there is a particular, you mentioned kind of prescription from a doctor's office of pain pills. Are you seeing any other things that can give you any idea as to why this is on the rise? No. And it's less and less the prescribed opiates or even the FDA-approved opiates that are the issue now. It's really, and it's gone from heroin to fentanyl. Very few of our patients at this point are actually using heroin. They are using fentanyl. Is that because it is easier to get, less expensive? What is the reason behind that?
The high is so intense compared to heroin. Heroin's high is even more intense than OxyContin. And I don't know that there's a equivalency in terms of the cost, but it's the potency of the drug itself. And the challenge there is you need such a teeny tiny piece of it to actually get high that if someone is experimenting, if you will, and they try to use equivalent amount of fentanyl that they use as heroin, they'll die right away.
Those are just such sobering numbers. It's really difficult to hear. I know you guys are a treatment center.
Yes.
What if someone comes to you, do you tend to find that they are coming to you sort of to head off? They realize maybe they've got a problem and they'd like to head it off, or are you finding that folks are coming to you because you are their last resort?
I don't know that last resort would be the way I would put it.
Okay.
But it would be unusual for someone to come seeking treatment in the very beginning of their disease process. More likely, it's mom or grandma who's making that first call or making that first reach out. They know what's happening to their loved one, and they want to try to head off what they believe to be a life-threatening issue. There are studies that show that it doesn't really matter why you go into treatment. It's just as effective if you voluntarily check yourself in or if the court system says you have to go. It's really a matter of, am I ready to change? And that's what treatment really is all about. There's nothing magic about it. It is a behavioral change. And that's what you're doing from a clinical perspective, is helping people to understand where they are now, know what they want to accomplish, and then how do you get there, and how do you change behaviors. It's a total life change in order to make this effective.
And it sounds like a lot of times probably the drug use is not sort of in a bubble. There is a reason that maybe a person has gotten to the point where they feel they need to abuse some sort of substance, drugs, alcohol, whatever it may be. Are you finding any commonality there that before that drug use, before they get to you, there are similar circumstances that maybe these folks have gone through?
I would guess that about 90% of our patients have a trauma issue. Now, was the trauma prior to the use and in an attempt to mask that pain, or did the trauma occur because of all the things you do to get your drug? Prostitution, stealing, all of those things that drive you to do things you wouldn't normally do, because the change in your brain is what's driving that issue. The earlier you can keep people from abusing drugs, the less likely they are to move from a problem to a dependency. And that's something we try to work with our patients too, around the trauma issues.
Sure. So give me an example of someone who comes to you. What options are available to them for treatment?
Treatment is sort of misunderstood by the public in general because there are different, what we call levels of care. You have initial care, you have intensive outpatient care, you have regular outpatient care, you have group therapy, you have individual therapy. Your treatment agencies will be assessment, and based on your answers to the questions will help us know what level of care will be most effective for you today. With CAT, public that knows us as the Cat House.
Okay.
A because of our initials, and then we originally started as a residential program, so it's just much easier to say Cat House than all of those letters. But we offer medical detox, which is a program that's not duplicated very often. In fact, we're the only nonprofit, non-hospital-based detox in 180 miles of where we sit today. The other things that we do are a short-term residential stay, so anywhere between 20 and 30 days. We do group therapy. We do individual counseling. We do continuing care for people who basically have finished, if you will, the residential pieces, and so they stay with us for at least another 12 weeks. We recently become mental health certified, so we can help the family members understand how this is impacting them and what they can expect or should expect or hope to expect when the loved one is discharged, if you will, from a treatment program. This is just the beginning. This is just the first step. This is a lifelong process. Right. And the more people get engaged with not only what happens within the confines of the treatment program, but within the 12-step program. And I'm not in recovery, but I can tell you the people who really embrace spirituality, regardless of religion, but the spiritual piece of this, they're the persons who do the best. Wow. And they're very grounded in that spirituality.
Sure. This is awesome. It sounds like you have a lot of really great resources, not just for folks who come seeking treatment, but you even mentioned friends and family members.
Correct.
And I think that's maybe an element that we sometimes forget about, is that it's not just you who might be affected by your drug use, but friends and family are also having to deal with the ramifications of what is going on.
Correct. The first people you steal from are your parents or your grandparents. Then you progressively move on. So everyone is affected by the actions of the person who is active in their own disease.
Yeah. So as we finish up here, Sandi, real quick, what resources can you share with our listeners? Do you have a website or a phone number? If they're dealing with this themselves or a family member, what can they do?
Well, if they want to contact CAT, our website is catsober.org. And within Hamilton County, there's an agency that does a lot of the assessments for pre-placement, and that's the Addiction Services Council. I don't have their phone number in front of me, though, but the Addiction Services Council would be a first-line entry.
Well, these sound like some great resources and really some great information that you shared with us today about the current situation that we're facing with opioids and what can be done and what you guys are doing to help battle that, and we thank you for that.
We thank you. Appreciate it.
I'm Jessica Rice, and you've been listening to Community Focus, a public affairs presentation of the Christian Broadcasting System.
You've been listening to Community Focus, a public affairs presentation of Christian Talk 1160 WCVX.